Hello.
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
So I just want to know, is there any rules or norms according to NAC for the collection development?
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
So let me start now. And anything which I missed it, we have a question answer session. So see, these refresher courses are very important as gives opportunity to update or in reskilling or upskilling our ourselves in managing in the context of technology in terms of various kind of resources. Collection development is one area which has not been very properly taken care in many of the libraries. Like what is the routine activities? Mostly books are recommended by faculty in a college or scientists in a in research institute, and most of the libraries are just acting as a facilitator, and they are just receiving the requisition, taking approval, placing order. So when we talk about a active collection development policy or program, see, library is because of collection. See, users are coming in the library for collections only. If you don't have good collection, if you don't have a collection which they want, they will not come to the library. So in recent year, when we see the libraries are not very well used, one of the reason in our library is the poor collection development. One thing you should remember, no library, how big or how small it may be, of the world can acquire all the collections required or desired by its user. So that's a point number one. Because of shrinking budget and increasing cost of the publication, even essential collections are not able to acquire many times. So in this kind of scenario, when this is the situation, the right collection become a very crucial issue, because within the available budget, how much books you can buy, how much collection you can develop. So a well-planned strategy, a well-planned program, collection development program is very essential. And collection development is not just about acquiring new books. Somebody asked me a question about the old books. Collection development includes how to deal with your existing collections. Collection development is also linked with your weeding out of books, stock verification, and also how to make the space management and other programs, because collection development is directly linked with your all. As a library is a growing organism, Ranganathan very clearly mentioned that. So collection development have many dimensions, not just purchase of books. Even somebody asked me, like, we have less budget, how to acquire most useful books. Then we also need to learn how to add open access to our collection, because that is also a collection. Open educational resources, open access journal, open access books, and the large amount of deep web. I repeat this again and again. There is 85% web is free. What we call it deep web, which contains a lot of academic information, a lot of government data, institutional repository, self-archiving data repository. That 85% of the web is free. So that is also a collection development activities. How to add those open access resources in your collection, that is also part of your collection development program. Now how you make it happen? That depends on lot. Many times we don't focus on many areas. We do things in a very routine manner. Like somebody is asking about COVID. Now, what was the major problem in during this pandemic? Still, higher education institutions are closed. So, digital access is the only way out. What in that the digital access? There is another important thing, like how to make things accessible to the users, because without remote access, you cannot reach out the users who are under lockdown in their homes or in hostel or other locations. So collection development is not just about acquiring books. How to make it accessible, how to promote it, how to reach out. What are the various kind of promotion drive? Because you may be spending a lot of money on buying a journal, subscribing a journal or buying a book. But if it is not used or it is not reaching out to the right user, everything is just waste of money. So as a librarian, you have multiple roles to play. Before starting this presentation, one thing I want to talk to you, all of you. The most important person in this entire collection development process is the librarian. Librarian has full authority to say no to any publication. Unfortunately, we librarians do not understand it. We do not use this authority. Sometimes somebody is saying that buy this, we purchase that. We never use our own wisdom. We never plan many programs and schemes of a good collection development policy. And that's why sometimes we, like you might have seen in many universities and colleges, there is a March ending pressure to buy books. So money is coming and then people are going to World Book Fair with a full faculty team and so many people together. Sometimes somebody is going to the bookshops. So in March end, we are buying books worth crores of rupees. So we are wasting money because collection development is on demand. It is a regular process, not a one-time process, or it doesn't depend upon that money will lapse or not lapse. It is that you buy a book which is required. And how soon you can purchase it. Like all those things are important. Like we are living in electronic world where Amazon or various kind of online shops are available. Have we introduced that in our purchase system or purchase of books or e-books? I think there are many things which we need to be innovative. We need to be creative in doing it. It is not just a routine activity. It requires a lot of investment, thinking, a lot of planning, and also a proper budget allocation. Like many times we forgot to make a kind of thematic collection system, like how much money should be allocated to each subject. Sometimes we have books in one subject because the users are recommending more books on one particular subject. And sometimes we don't have any single book on a particular subject. So that balancing collection, there are so many things which I will try to give you some my views on that, how to really do it. So let's start my presentation. So as I very clearly mentioned, a role of librarian is very, very important, which most of the librarians have surrendered the authority. They are just becoming a post office. Somebody is recommending and they are buying and placing order. Selection process. You have to really define a proper selection process. But what is happening? Like many universities or colleges or research institutes, there is a nexus between users and the book suppliers. The book suppliers are going to a particular user in his room and giving, showing some books, and he is recommending, and recommendation is coming to the library, and ultimately order is being placed to the particular bookseller without bothering that these books are required or not required, because somebody, some senior faculty or some researcher or scientist has recommended, we are buying it. Even in terms of approving authority, many times we don't have a written guidelines. And the most important thing in this current digital era, a kind of policy, how much print, how much electronic, how much printed books, how much electronic books. We should make a policy like how many printed books we should buy, how many electronic books we should buy. And the budget allocation is very, very important. How to allocate budget for each and every subject. So all disciplines should have a balancing. And also you can keep a check that one person should not recommend books worth of lakhs of rupees. Now how to do it, I will explain to you. And then conversion rate. Many librarians are still not aware that good office committee is no more in the practice. The good offices committee was relevant when there was a representation from Ministry of Finance. Now since Ministry of Finance has also withdrawn, and I doubt even National Library Association have any role in it. So this is just a publishers association, and publishers association will always fix a rate which is beneficial to them. So bank rate is the only option for you to decide on the prevailing. Now there are various ways of deciding on that how to do the bank rates. Like giving example, in JNU we were having a system that on 1st of every month the bank rates were obtained from the bank, and these rates were put on the website. These rates will be applicable for 15 days, next 15 days till 15th of the month. And this was as per the terms and condition of the book supply to the JNU library. So whatever rates are fluctuating during this particular 15 days, billing will be done on the basis of the bank rate on 1st. In this, library may be losing something or book supplier may be losing. It all depend upon situation. But instead of having everyday bank rate, we fix up a 15 days bank rate. Similarly, then 16 to 13, we took the rate on 15th of month, and 16 to 31st, those bank rates were applicable. Similarly, in case of journals, we were taking the bank rate on the date of transfer of the payments to the agency, the main agency, supplier, the vendor, or whomsoever it is. So these things are very, very important. Since my last 30 years of my professional careers, many times people talk about unethical practices in libraries, particularly when money is involved. Everybody start doubting the credibility even of an honest person. But these doubts are not baseless also. There are certain people who do unethical practices. That's why, but because of few people, most of the people are honest, but because of few such people, sometimes the profession got bad name. And these people who do it, everybody knows about it. So I think somewhere down the line, we are lacking a kind of proper professional association who can take action against such people. So these people can be forced not to do any kind of unethical practices. So one thing is very important, that you must be very, very honest, because God has given you everything. Why you need to look after all those such unethical practices? So these are some of the issues which, uh, while doing book purchase or subscription of journal, you should keep it in mind that somewhere down the line, these are the important issues for consideration. Now, why collection development policy? Why I am talking about a written collection development policy? So basically, every policy has certain tasks. And what is the task of this collection development policy? Selection, maintaining and providing access to relevant and most useful resources, both in print and electronic. Right? Second important task is it acts as a roadmap or guidelines for selecting or deselecting books. Means purchasing, adding new books or weeding out old books. See, now both print and electronic books are required by the users. And this collection development policy also help in future budgeting, also determining priorities, like when you are starting a new course, then you have to make a future plan. Like you have to have some kind of provisions to have more books for the new course. And this policy should also look into the issues of collaboration, consortia, alliances. Like you are a member of ESOS in the consortia, and like suppose you are a college library, you are getting enlist. So 4,000 ebooks are available for you. That is also part of your collection. So those alliances and consortia should also be part of your policy. Because many times, like when you are negotiating a pricing in InflipNet consortia, you need not to negotiate the same price in your in-house, because you can go for the same price what InflipNet has negotiated. For collection development, you need to have some important committees. Never take decision alone. Always have a collective approach. So depending upon the size of the institute, depending upon the budget and the other issues, you can have a different level of committees. Like you can have university level library advisory committee. And that, if you are a big university like JNU, DU or Rajasthan University, you can also have some school level, departmental level committee or library coordinator. Or you should also, I have always included a library student representative in the library committee. It may be IMT Ghaziabad, it may be TFR, it may be MDI, it may be JNU. I have always included a student as a library representative in the library committee. Then after the main committee, you can have some subcommittees. Like you can have some kind of resource review subcommittee. Suppose you are starting some new, you want to subscribe some new database, you want to add some new resources, you want to buy a large collection of new course books. So you can have some small review subcommittees. And then also you need to have another small negotiation subcommittee. Like generally in a university library in JNU, there was 13 totally 18 members in the committee, institutional level committee. So you cannot have 18 members negotiation committee. So a library committee can form this subcommittee to negotiate the pricing of the databases. And then you can also have a weeding out subcommittee. Like weeding out books, you can have a small committee which can finalize the process of weeding out of books. So depending upon your needs and requirement, suppose if you are a small institution, maybe only one committee may be sufficient. But for bigger institutions like universities, you need to have all these separate level of committees. So that's the first requirement of a collection development policy, that you need to have a committee. And generally, librarian should be the either secretary or the convener, and if required, you may have, depending upon the size, you may have your deputy or assistant librarian, or they can be invited as a special invitees in the meeting. But they should be part of the meeting as a special invitee or a member of the committee, whatever you feel, according to your needs. That is also important to involve your deputy librarian and assistant librarian, next officer in charge, because this way you can also develop the second level leadership in your institution, because after you, somebody should be there who can manage in your absence. So he or she should be aware of all the process and policies. So as a special invitee or as a member, you should also always engage your second in command or the deputy or second librarian. Now, IFLA has also developed certain guidelines for collection development policy. If you want to know more about that, you can go through this policy. If this is the link given, you can download this and can read it, right? So, what are the various kind of component of the guidelines for a collection development policy? So, first thing is the terms and condition. What should be the terms and condition of your collection development? What are collection development policy in terms of scope, coverage, and if you want to add some introductory para about the collection development policy, the basic structure of a collection development policy, if you want to see, you can have a look to the JNU collection development policy, which is available on JNU website. And if you want, I can ask somebody to make it available to you. So, what are the various kind of issues in collection management? First, you should define role and responsibility of library committee, of librarian, who should be the approving authority, who should be the selecting, who should be the reviewing authority. According to the delegation of financial power, like in JNU, I was having financial power up to 50,000 rupees. So books costing up to 50,000, I may have recommended. Beyond that, there is a power given to rector was up to 2 lakhs. So the books up to 2 lakh rupees were going to the rector. And if book costing more than 2 lakh, it is going to vice chancellor, who is the highest. So according to the delegation of power, you can define who should be the approving authority. Then in selection process should be clearly mentioned, like in a school or center, any student and faculty can recommend it. So what I recommended in this process in JNU, that there should be a school level library committee. So when recommendation goes to dean, before that, a school level library committee should review the recommendation, and that committee should send the recommendation to the library, the university library. And also there is a budget allocation. I have made a budget allocation in JNU, like based on the number of students and number of faculty in a particular school or center, we calculated the total amount, and according to that amount was multiplied, and each school and center was allocated an amount for a year that you can purchase books costing that amount. So all those things should be very, very clearly defined in the selection of library materials for acquisition and access. Then also bidding out or deselection, like you should also define in the collection policy that what is the bidding out process? Who should make the list? How to check the list? And then how it is going to be circulated to the users for their comments or review. And then after receiving the comments and review, who should review it? Who should approve it? So in that, like, give you an example of JNU again. Library staff was supposed to require, each section in charge was supposed to prepare the list of bidding out books. The list was circulated to all faculty members for review and with the recommendation that if you want to keep any book out of that in the library, please give your recommendation. After that, receiving all the recommendation, we used to have we used to put in the library committee, and after the library committee approval, it went to through finance to the vice chancellor. Finance has to verify the finance detail, pricing, etc. And then a vice chancellor has to approve it for bidding out. And after that, our bidding out process was that we used to distribute those books free to the faculty and students. And if any book which is not picked up by them were put for donation to any other library, if anybody, any other library want to take it. So in that basis, we have donated many books, such old books to the other libraries. Even a complete collection of news clippings after digitization was donated to a library in Ahmedabad. Because this collection development also linked with the storage and preservation, like how you manage the storage. Give you an example. When I joined JNU, there was a 2-floor full of news clippings. So what I did, these were about 10 lakhs news clipping. So what I did, I digitized all the news clipping, and after digitization, it was put online. And then I took the approval of the management to bid it out by donating to some library. And I put an advertisement on the JNU library website that any library is interested in taking these news clippings, we will happy to give it to it. So a library from Gujarat came and they collected all the news clippings. So in this way, I'm able to vacate about 2-floor area for storage of new books. And then, as I have already mentioned to you that you have to learn how to manage budget. Delnet, how Delnet can help you in managing your various needs. And eSource Consortia, how it helps you in providing additional resources. Then alternate funding options. Sometimes some kind of additional fund under CSR or in form of some other agencies can help you in having, like if you remember, when Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, he given 1 crore rupees to Ratan Tata Library for purchase of books. So that one-time grant helped in getting a lot of valuable material in Ratan Tata Library. And this collection development policy is not something, once it is done, it is applicable for all the times. No. It is a continuous process. Every time, every year, or maybe more than once in a year, whenever something new, you need to change it. Like you may be putting a discount structure, but tomorrow you need to review it. You may be putting some kind of guidelines for purchase of print books, but later you realize you need to put guidelines for purchase of electronic books. So then you need to revise that also. Then you need to have a separate selection criteria for e-journal, e-resources. You cannot have same criteria, selection criteria for print and electronic resources. You may have same criteria for purchase of e-books and printed books, but you cannot have same criteria for purchase of e-books and e-journals. You have to have different criteria. So the first criteria, that criteria should be clearly defined, explained. So how you can do, like there is a request for purchase of e-databases or e-journals or print journals. So similarly, you have to have selection process, requisitions given by the faculty, student, and then reviewed by the dean and coming to the library, and then reviews by the library committee, and then being approved by the financial authorities. And also you need to have a review and trials. Like when we purchase this EBSCO Discovery Services, we have 1 year trial, free trial of 3-4 resources together. And we compare the trial data, that which one is more useful. And on the basis of technical parameters and other details, we found that EBSCO Discovery was a better tool. And then also you need to look into the quality and usability and the usefulness of that particular resource for your users. Licensing and funding option are very important. Like you need to look into the licensing issues regarding that particular resource, and also how the money will come from, where the funding will come. Do you have sufficient funding to acquire that resource? So all these selection criteria regarding e-books and e-journals should be separated out. In case of e-journals and e-books, licensing is very, very important. And you must read those. Many times these licenses are in very small letters and we ignore it. Never sign an agreement without reading it. Because all the issues, all the things covered regarding access, preservation, back files, digital archive access, everything is included in that license agreement. Like this license agreement is a mutual agreement between you and the publisher. It should have scope and coverage very clearly defined. It also have archival access, like you have to see, is it perpetual access agreement? It is a subscription based agreement. It is a single license agreement, single license user access agreement. It is a 3 user license agreement, or it is a multi-user license agreement. During the period of subscription, is that perpetual access available or not? What about the back files? How many years of archival access is available with this? Access is only in the university, or it is off-campus access is also available? Can you install remote access or not? Can you provide access to your alumni? If you have multiple location campus, like Delhi University, there are number of colleges. So is that access is available in all the campuses or all the affiliated colleges? What about course pack and course reserves? Like, are you allowed to, your faculty is allowed to distribute printout or email, through email PDF files of those articles or ebooks? Can you send it on interlibrary loan basis or not? What are these issues which you need to look into that? And never agree for auto renewals unless you have a multi-year agreement with a specified payment solution. What is this multi-year agreement? Like multi-year agreements is the various kind of. There is a two things which you should be know: multi-year agreement and auto renewals. Multi-year agreement is that you are committing to a publisher that you will subscribe this product for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then in that multi-year agreements, it has been agreed that the price will not be increased, or if it is increased, there will be a fixed limit, like every year 2%, every year 3%. So there will be a price cap. So that publisher may be increasing the price for every institution, but it will be a price cap on that. Auto renewal is that for a number of years, the agreement will be automatically renewed by the publisher. So in that case, the pricing should be defined, like what should be the price paid. Like suppose you agreed for a price for 3 years, and on the same price auto renewals, but avoid auto renewals. Multi-year agreement should be done in the case of very, very essential products, something which you always require. Another important thing is in renewal or subscription of electronic resources is that review of existing resources. Let me tell you one story. When I joined in JNU, there were no e-books. There were some 1800 print journals. Some of them were print plus online. And there were some databases. 26 databases were received from InfluentNet, and there were some about subscribed. So in first year, on the recommendation, I also added few databases on that. So in 2012, next year, I asked one of my colleagues, Dr. Praveen Babbar, that you do a kind of analysis that those print journals we are subscribing separately, are these available in any of these databases? So after a comprehensive analysis, we found that journals worth 1.2 crore subscription, I'm repeating, rupees 1.2 crore subscription, were already available in various databases, except few which were in like having embargo access, and some are having delayed access. But most of these journals were available. So what I decided, we decided to drop those journals costing 1.2 crore, and we saved 1.2 crore, and in that 1.2 crore we added another 15 databases in JNU library that particular year. So it is important for you to regularly review your existing subscription. That was the number one. Second review option was that we decided that if any database or a journal is not having that number of download, we should not subscribe it. We should ask to review it. So we fix a limit that less than 50 download in a particular journal, we should not continue to subscribe it. And then we prepare the list of such journals, e-journals, and we circulate it to the faculty. These are the journals which are having 50 download. If you feel any of these are essential, we will continue, otherwise we will discontinue. So in that way, we also, every year we are doing this exercise in JNU. So we were deleting or adding new journals in place of the old existing journals. So this is another important part of the collection development, particularly for e-journals and databases: regular review and also monitoring, usage statics monitoring, etc. right? So this is another way of. Now, when we talk about various kind of uh, print or electronic resources, see, these are the various kind of e-resources. Everybody you know that e-books, e-journals, databases, CD-ROM now obsolete, but a lot of online resources. So in this, e-books are not very well picked up in recent times. If you see the last few year data, e-journals have reached at the highest level. Now almost every journal is in e-journal format, but it is not the same thing with the e-books. So why is the reason of why there is a slowdown in terms of e-books market in India? See, even in India, e-book market is just 1% of the total sales. And that is very negligible. So what is the reason why people are not going for e-books, or why less e-books are purchased? First of all, the most important reason is, like in case of printed books, there is a printed price or catalog price. Then you fix a discount and you easily buy it. But in case of e-books, the pricing models are different. Like aggregator and the subscribe publisher is having different pricing. And sometimes these prices are also very confusing, and discounts are also very confusing. So people hesitate in buying e-books. Another is the licensing model, like sometimes one user license and 3 user license are less costly, but multi-user license is very expensive. So these are the initial complexity in terms of access model and also pricing. Another issue is that even most of the textbooks or the books which are in demand are not available in e-books initially. They will be available later, not in the beginning. And users are also not very well aware of that usage. But librarian can make a difference in that. Give you an example, when I joined JNU, there was not a single e-book in the JNU library. And when I left in 2018, more than 3 to 4 lakhs e-books and then subscription of 2 e-book library was there, which total near about 4 to 5 lakhs books e-books were accessible. So in that process, like what you have to do, you have to make a policy and you have to work out various kind of collection development process for e-books. And how you can do it, like I will just go to that, I will not talk more on this. I will give you some kind of acquisition models and pricing models. So e-books are having different kind of models. Like one is the subscription of e-book library. The libraries like EBSCO Net Library or World Book Library, or there are e-library, e-brary. So these are the libraries which are subscribed, annual subscription based product. So in this, you have some limited scope to download, like you can download 40% or 60%, something like that. You can know what are the books available, and lakhs of books are available. And many of the books may not be relevant to you also. So one model is that you subscribe these ebook libraries. Another is one-time purchase, perpetual access. You buy a ebook forever. That becomes part of your collection. Then there is another model, interlibrary lending. Now you can lend a book for some periods, and you pay some amount for that. And then also there are kind of demand driven acquisition or models in which like a publisher will be giving you access to 10,000 ebooks and they will charge you some, suppose $5,000 or something. It's not an exact amount, example I'm giving you. So in that case, what happens? Like when you will be having access to those 10,000 ebooks for a year. After a year, you will be given option to buy some books costing that particular amount. So, and then also there are different kind of other models also. These are the various kind of access models. Then there is a purchase model. So in purchase model, there is a pick and choose model. Like you can select whichever books you want, just like a printed books. And you can decide you want single user license, 3 user license or multi-user license. Then there is some kind of bundle subscription, like a publisher is giving you subject bundles, like biomedical science collection, humanities collection. In that collection, there is a price fixed that you will get this collection in this price. And there is a heavy discount on that. And there are other way you can get books in form of like some collections, subject specific collections. Some publishers make marketing directly. You can directly subscribe from the publisher. Some do it through aggregators. So, like what is the difference between publisher and aggregator? Aggregators are the kind of book suppliers like EBSCO or Procrest. So they will provide you ebooks of every publisher. They will have a collection from every publisher. But publisher will provide their own books. So you have to really understand, before making a policy or purchase, you have to really understand what are these models of purchase of ebooks. Now, when we talk about this demand-driven acquisition or pattern-driven acquisition, in this, there are different models like JSTOR is having model. You give them $1,000 advance and they will open up entire collection. Your user will go, will have a look to all the collections, entire books, and any book having like same chapter of a book having 6 download or 6 views or 4 download, it is considered purchased. So automatically the cost of the book will be deducted from your advance. So that is the one model of pattern acquisition or demand-driven acquisition. There are a number of other models. So demand-driven acquisition is based on your requirement. Like which book is required by user, you pay for it. Right? Then there is a consortium model. Take example of Enlist. eSource Sindhu Consortia is providing access to ebooks to the 4,000 colleges in India. So they have negotiated the prices and you can pay the complete amount or eSource Sindhu is paying, Infinite is paying an amount instead of colleges. So various kind of consortium are also purchased. So how to frame a particular collection development policy for ebooks? So you have to put step by step, like selection, review, approval, financial approval, placing order, acquisition, and then how to promote it by putting in catalog or somewhere else. Right. So, as I have already explained to you that JNU acquisition policy contains all the complete process about it. Bank rate, I have already mentioned that bank rates were based on every 15 days, the bank rates were changed. Now I'm coming how to strengthen this particular system. It is important to promote ebooks. You may be spending money on ebooks, but how to promote it? Like, one thing is that you should have a good website. You should use discovery services. You should also use remote access so people can use, and particularly in this corona time, now the focus will be more on more ebook development, ebook purchase. So you should also think of having all these technologies in place, and definitely people will happy to make use of it. Remember, after procuring all the ebooks, you should add in your OPEC. You should organize the orientation program. You should upload MARC record in library catalog. All publishers are providing MARC record. You should do regular assessment. Like we did an assessment that how many people are using ebooks when I was in JNU. So we were able to know how many people are, and there is a need to purchase ebooks or not, and what are the areas which are missing. Ebooks are most important nowadays, not just because of corona, but otherwise also. So your library should be having a preferential policy of purchase of ebooks. E-journals you are already doing. There are a number of advantages of ebooks. And ebooks are only useful when your users are aware of it. Your users are trained in how to make use of electronic resources. You should have a very transparent policy, and you should open to every book supplier and distributor. And one more important thing which I want to tell you, that never agree to their terms and conditions. You should be a hard negotiator in terms of ebooks and e-databases. So you should be negotiating with them. Sometime like negotiating, they may not provide you like discount, but sometimes they give you the access to another databases. Like we subscribed one product from one publisher, and 2 products were freely given for 1 year access. So that way you can provide more resources to your users in negotiation. So there are a number of ways of negotiation. So I think remember, as a librarian, you are responsible for fulfilling the information needs of the users. Quality collection is must to connect users with library. Just collection is not enough. Acquisition is not enough. Proper online catalog, discovery services and outreach programs are very important for promotion of the collection. And you should have more and more acquisition of electronic resources. That should be your preferential policy. With these things, now I will stop share the screen. I will come on the screen and will be happy to interact with you for your questions and any suggestions. So feel free to now interact with me on various questions and suggestions or any comments. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful talk on collection development. We have some queries from the participants, so please one by one.
Hello.
Do you have any queries?
Can I first go through those questions which are put in chat box? Then we will take.
Yes. Yeah, sure, sir, sure.
So in this chat box, somebody is asking on e-collection development policy. I have already given a complete detail. I will give you the summary on vendor selection. There is a very important question: how to select a vendor. What I did in JNU, I explained you for both print and non-print. So for print, we made a kind of guidelines. Like how we made the guidelines, we prepared some terms and conditions. Like we fixed up a discount, that this will be the discount. We were not going by GOC discount rate. We went to the we fixed 20% for Indian books and 25% for Indian books and 20% for foreign books for single copy. And multiple copies discount was higher. So the first condition was that any supplier should be agree on this discount. Then second was our bank rate. So we were having policy that bank rate will be the only criteria for billing, and we will be giving first to 15 bank rate, then 16 to 30 bank rate. So bank rate of first was applicable to 15th and of 16th was applicable to 31st. So second terms and condition was that you should have to agree to that. Third condition was that you should be registered with Publishers Federations or Publishers Association. You should have like that time there was a cell text number, no GST. So you should put GST number is must. Third, like you should be in business at least minimum 3 years. And then there was some criteria, you should not have been blacklisted by any organization. So make those kind of terms and condition and criteria. And those who wish to register with you, you make it open to everyone. And it should be a continuous process. This should not be one-time selection only. If in between somebody else comes, then you should, and also have a terms and condition that your services are not satisfying, you will be banned. Like suppose you are not able to supply the order and not able to fulfill the terms and condition or any kind of unethical practices. So all these terms and conditions were prepared. If you want, you can obtain those terms and conditions from JNU. It's about 20-25 terms and condition I have prepared. So on the basis of vendor for a print purchase was selected. Similarly for e-resources, what I did, we called for discount rates from the various aggregators and the publishers. Then please tell us your maximum discount you will provide on purchase of ebooks. So we received offer from most of the big publishers and the suppliers, and then a committee was formed, and then committee negotiated with all of them, and then we made a panel of aggregators. Like there were 2 aggregators. So the one who offered the higher discount, we enrolled that for 1 year. That next 1 year, all the orders will be placed to you. Similarly, like we want to buy Cambridge University Press books. So whatever maximum discount negotiated with Cambridge University Press, that was listed. Oxford University Press, Taylor and Francis, Routledge, and all those important publishers. So on the basis of highest discount offered, and discount was for single book purchase. Even if you want to buy 1 book, you have to give this discount. So after negotiation, the list was prepared, panel was prepared, and in future, if you want any books, order was placed to that. So that was a little like cumbersome process. We have to work hard, but I'm able to have a transparent process for purchase of ebooks. Similarly, for negotiation in the vendors, like journals, we were having a limit that any database costing 1 lakh, more than 1 lakh, should be negotiated. Less than 1 lakh or single journal were not negotiated. So that was a part of the policy. On the basis of that, there is a subcommittee of negotiation, and negotiation committee negotiate the price. Sometimes we are doing for multi-year agreement, sometimes for single year agreement. Sometimes we are adopting price negotiated by the InfluMnet, depending upon the product. So in that way you can make a policy. But one thing I want to tell you, whatever I'm talking to you, everything should be documented, everything should be written and get it approved by the library committee and the highest authority. Somebody was asking about the audit. Audit only object when something is done which is not a written part of the policy. Give you an example. I allowed purchase of books through Amazon or other online bookshops to the PhD student, MPhil student and teachers. So what was the process? Process was that if any book is not available in local market and it is urgently required by a PhD student, he will get a certificate from the library. If the book is not available from the open market. You can buy from the Amazon.com or any bookshop and submit the book and the copy of the statement of credit card or bank statement along with the invoice, and the amount will be directly reimbursed to that particular student or teacher. So that was written in the collection development policy. So although we were not getting discount on many books, we were also paying handling charges in that. So if you are making such policy, no audit can object to it. So what is important, you have to make a written policy for each and every process should be properly documented, and it should be approved by the highest authority, means vice chancellor in case of university, college principal or director. So all these things are important in that context. I think then there is a question. I think academic library or research library, the collection development policy is depend upon the vision and mission statement of your university or college. So you should draft according to that. I have already mentioned about the old books write-off procedure. See, first you make the list, which books you want to write it off, and then get it circulated to all your users, get their recommendation, and after that you take the approval of library committee if you have or advisory committee, and then get it approved from the head of the institution. And after approval, you should first write off from your accession register and also from your OPAC, and then you should dispose it off by distributing free or donating to any library, other library or other users, or maybe sell it, dispose it off to the Kawadiwala. Depend upon you what you want. But this everything should be properly documented. So I think now we can take up questions on the screen. So please tell your name and ask your question.
Sir, my question, just now you said that we can, discarded books can be donated to any other library, but the books have all the documentation of our library, that is the name and everything. So how to manipulate all these things? How to manage these things?
It happens, like those small libraries like NGO libraries or basically public libraries, they generally accept such books. Because I'll give you an example. There is a Voluntary Health Association of India, BHAI in Delhi. So they closed down their library. So they donated to JNU, to me, 30,000 books. Now, what I decided, out of these 30,000 books, some of the books are useful for us. So we selected and we accessioned in our JNU library. So what we did, we crossed the stamp of BHAI and put JNU stamp on it and then added to the collection. And there were certain books which were not useful to the JNU library. I distributed free to the JNU and faculty, student and faculty. No problem in that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, please.
Sir, this is Nihal from Kolkata, sir.
Yeah, Nihal, how are you?
Yeah,
Nice
I'm
to
fine,
see you
sir.
after a long time.
Yes, sir. Actually, the thing is that, sir, last year now we have received a notification from Government of West Bengal that all the print books should be directly purchased from the publishers only. So if we are having a 300 title of different publishers, so it's very difficult and tedious job to coordinate with the different publishers, and also the procurement means agreement between the publisher and the library is quite very hectic because you have to pay in advance sorts of thing. So finally we thought that we should move to the tendering process. So is it tendering process is the right process for the print books procurement, sir?
No, I think you all note it down. As per GFR, Government Financial Rules, library books are not store item, and there is no tendering required for purchase of library books. If anybody is asking, it is violating the GFR. So tell those agencies that under GFR, There is no provision to ask for tendering of books. Books are purchased on the basis of the printed price and a proper discount rate, whatever your policy is there, on the basis of that. So resist that. Like many times these bureaucrats are not aware of it. And many times those administrators, finance people, auditors, and you need to convince them, you need to educate them. So I think you have to make it hard, but I think you should convince them that tendering is not correct. And as per GFR, it is not required to go for tendering or purchase of books, journals, or databases or journals. Nothing, no tendering is required.
Sir, adding to this, sir, the same points I have resisted with the finance officer also. Then he said, basically our funding agency is the state government. So you have to abide by the rules framed by West Bengal Financial Department only. So as of now, West Bengal don't have any policy. So whatever the notifications that we have received from the finance department, we have to abide by then only. Then I have said, what's about the central government GFR rules? Then he said, actually, I'm having no idea on that. So presently, I'm just following the notification of West Bengal government.
So then do one thing, you talk to ISLIC. ISLIC is a library association. Ask them to write a letter to that state department with quoting the rules and attaching copy of GFR that this is a wrong certification. You should not insist on that, and the notification should be changed. Because I know you alone cannot do it, but if it is a state government notification, but library association should this matter, and they should do something in this regard. Right?
Anyone else would like to ask any question?
Hello, sir. Myself, Dr. Vijay Kumar from Karnataka, sir. Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Ask one by one, please.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Little louder. I can't hear you.
Hello. Is there any return collection development policy for the e-resources, sir?
There may be many.
Hello.
It depends. See,
Sir, is there any guidelines for
collection development policy?
e-resources collection development policy, sir?
If you want to do the model collection development policy, then IFLA is having a model collection development policy. You go to IFLA website and can download it.
Okay.
Like you can go to JNU library website. I have developed a policy for JNU. So this policy was there for both print and electronic resources. So you can download that, or you can request assistant librarian, Mr. Rao, to and obtain the copy of those terms and conditions in the collection development policy of JNU. IGNC is also having, I have also prepared an IGNC, but IGNC is a special library. So it is generally having different set of requirements. If you want IGNC, a collection development policy can also be provided. But if you want, JNU is more relevant for academic libraries. But if you want, you are a special library, you can request me, I can provide you the IGNC collection development policy also. Right?
Okay, Balaji, please ask your question.
No, my side question, sir. I am ready for vote of thanks.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Sir, shall start?
Yes, please.
Yes. Dr. Ramesh Gaur, sir, I am very sincere thanks to cover all points of collection development policy, including books, e-collections in our in library. You have to cover all points. You have given us suggestions to plan your collection policy development, because without the collection policy you can't be do on that. Your experience was very vast, sir, and it will be very useful, and I hope it will be very useful in our future activity, sir. Thank you very much. I also thank you to Dr. Purnima Kaushik ma'am, Dr. Rishabh sir, Dr. Santosh sir, to arrange such a very informative lecture to you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh Gaur sir. Once again, thank you to all.
Thank you all and take care, stay safe and do good work and keep this profession proud. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir. All the best. Bye bye. Well.